Hey y'all, so welcome to another episode of Poly Side Eye with me and Jared. This is our first episode of the new year. How have you been?
I've been pretty good. Had a nice, restful holiday season. Went back to Louisiana. Yeah, went to see my best friend in Atlanta. Yeah, it was nice, restful reset. So now I'm ready to jump back into the hamster wheel in 2025.
Yeah. Um, God, our last episode was in like November, so we had like a whole month off, from talking about politics. I just feel like, everyone just buried their head in the sand and they just really don't want to know what's going on right now. So I just, thought we can talk about like just what's going on right now, or like what should we care about now that the transition is coming in like what, a week or two?
Well, yeah. So January 20th is the inauguration day, but the new Congress is going to be inaugurated like pretty much imminently. So, but honestly, like I kind of alluded to this in the last episode we did, and I honestly want people to kind of like not focus on electoral politics right now, just because honestly, I don't think that there's much that people can do from a standpoint of like changing what happens in Washington. So what I think people should be focused on, and this might sound really basic or really like Pollyanna-ish, but like I think people need to learn or to figure out a way to be social again. Because the thing that concerns me more than anything else is I think we've kind of lost in a lot of respects the ability to be social. And I think knowing how to be social and like interacting with other human beings in some type of fashion, I think is going to be really important for any type of political change down, in the future, later down the road. So focus on that. Do like simple things and learn how to like be social and try to build community. I think that's the task most people should be preoccupied with.
What makes you think people aren't being social?
Well, I mean, the Surgeon General last year, the year before last, called loneliness an epidemic in the sense that we know from quite a lot of research that people are not really engaging in community activities anymore. So, or at least not nearly to the degree they used to. I mean, that's a trend that had been ongoing for a while, and that COVID just accelerated. And so so he declared a loneliness epidemic like 2 years ago. We also know that people are having trouble like dating or finding romantic partners. And, as I've talked about, I think that's something that's actually really concerning because I think love is actually really important for the human condition and for people to be healthy and to have a complete sense of kind of meaning in their lives. And so I think things like that are things that we can actually try to work on. Now, I do think that as we've talked about in the episodes we've done on like dating and sex and stuff, like a lot of that is a result of our work lives in the sense that we're burnt out. So there's a really good book about this called The Burnout Society by Byung-Chul Han, in which he actually philosophically tries to understand the concept of burnout. Like, why are we so burnt out from dating, from work, from pretty much everything? And so like he tries to make sense of like what is behind the burnout phenomenon and like the effects that it has on us. And like one thing he advises us to do is like essentially learn how to be inactive, which is hard to do because in our society, like being inactive makes it seem like we're not doing anything important. And like what he argues is that inactivity is actually necessary for human flourishing, which might seem counterproductive to us, but it's necessary for us to be inactive so that we don't feel burnout in like when we try to do things with people. Like how many times have we like made plans with people and then you're like secretly hoping like the person like cancels because you're like, oh, I don't really feel like leaving the house. Okay, we need to like get past that. And so like we'll never be political subjects again until we learn how to be social creatures again. And so, yeah, that's been my preoccupation. And that's what I'm going to be talking about when I launch my blog again on Monday. So just to give people...
Right.
What'd
you say?
I'm relaunching my Substack. And so like, this is going to be a complete rebrand. So I don't want to give everything away because I want it to be, somewhat different. But like what I'm going to focus on is to get us to not be so preoccupied with what's going on in DC, and like try to give people things to think about and things that they can actually like address in their day-to-day lives. And a lot of these things I'm going to discuss are going to seem like really basic or like really I'm going to use one of your favorite words, quotidian. But I think these are things that are in the long term going to be really important for our society. So be on the lookout for that.
Great. I'll make sure to put the link in the description below. But how can we be inactive when it's like, if I'm being inactive, that means I'm not making money. Like I have to spend money in order to be inactive, it feels like. In New York, it's just like to go outside costs $50. Like as soon as you step outside, $50.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, so I think there's like two things to that. Like part of the reason people are staying inside so much is because it's so fucking expensive. Like you go outside and you spend like $100 on a meal and like 2 drinks. And so like I sympathize with that. Like I do think that the way our economy, especially in the last few years with inflation, has like really changed the calculus for a lot of people, in the sense that like now it actually incentivizes people to like stay inside, which I understand, I'm sympathetic to. So like again, I'll discuss on my blog things that I think we could do, or at least consider as we try to hopefully make the world better than it was the day prior.
Mm-hmm. So I noticed we have 40 people in the chat.
Oh, thanks for coming and hang out with us on a Friday. See, like,
50
like
now.
they should be out and stuff, and they're like on the chat with us instead. So
we thank you. Not only can you please hit that like button, please subscribe as well, but please feel free to participate in the chat. I'm going to read about a bunch of comments and also ask questions too. Lotus Life. I work for Homeland Security, and we have the meeting today about having to help provide security for the pre-inauguration rally.
Oh.
In Canada, we have a very scary leader too, but everyone's saying he'll be gone too. I'm not really sure who's the leader in Canada right now.
Well, the West is really, as I've kind of talked about, like on our show, we typically talk about like American politics because I'm assuming most of our viewers are in the US. But a lot of the issues in the US are true in Canada, in the UK, in France, in Germany. In fact, it's actually worse in a lot of parts of Europe in terms of like the reactionary nature of our politics and like, loneliness and things like that. So like a lot of these things, even though I talk about it in the US context, are actually applicable outside of the US. So I just wanted to say that.
I genuinely believe that some evil politicians are actively working on removing free public spaces. It does feel that way.
Yeah, so this is yes, I think that's right, but not in like a conspiratorial way. So like part of the reason we're losing public spaces is because what's happening in the United States, not just in the US, but most of the West, is what's often called enclosure by political economists. So like what enclosure means is that you take what were formerly public spaces and you privatize them so you can essentially commodify them. So you can charge people essentially an admission. It's technically called a rent, but like essentially paying people or forcing people or making people pay to use a space. And so there is something to that, but it's not just like, oh, we hate like everyday people. It's like cities do that because private spaces are usually like taxable. And so like they usually are looking for more tax revenue. So like it's one of those things where you kind of rob Peter to pay Paul, in the sense that you enclose these formerly public spaces and then you like charge people to access them. So like a good example of this is not just like parks and stuff, but like in a lot of cities, parking in certain areas used to be free. And so what do they start doing? They start metering or charging to even like, park in a lot. And like, why do they do that? Well, not just because they're just like, let's just be greedy and make money, but because like municipal governments are often strapped for revenue, mainly because people don't want to pay taxes for obvious reasons, especially wealthy people. So there is something to that, but it's not like Miss Dr. Evil, like, ooh, let's do something. It's not like that. It's like there actually is an imperative behind it, even if to us it seems ridiculous. I'm not like justifying what they're doing. I'm just like giving a political science explanation for it.
Yeah.
Because I think it's ridiculous, but yeah.
Happy New Year. I truly enjoy poli sci. I'm enjoying being home inside, enjoying my mortgage.
I know that's right. People like, I mean, hell, if the rent's so damn high, people are like, look, I'm enjoying this space where I'm paying all this mortgage or this rent. So like, I get it. I understand. So yeah.
Robin Moore. Jared, do you draw any connection between the establishment of Space Force and the prominence of Musk at Trump's side?
I don't really have so much to say about the former, but I mean, the latter, in terms of like, why is Musk so central to Trump? I mean, we've always had like, wealthy people who have been super close.
Controlling the government.
So, yeah, I'm like, I mean, back in like, the early 20th century, you had like JP Morgan, like the government literally went to JP Morgan and asked to like borrow his money to like save the country from depression. Like, this is not new. So like, there's always been a very, especially since like the late 19th century, there's been, I don't know if you remember from like American history, they used to call them robber barons actually back in the day. Maybe we should bring that back. But yeah, and so like Elon Musk is, very wealthy. Part of it too is like, especially with the tariff war with China, Elon Musk has been really kind of pulling some of the strings behind that, because one of the things that is the most like heavily tariffs, it's like Chinese electric vehicles. Because I was actually just reading an article in the Financial Times the other day that like Tesla is really like struggling to compete against China's electric vehicle model, which is, if they sold it in the US without the tariffs, could probably retail for like about $15,000 to $20,000 for like a mid-tier electric vehicle, which Tesla obviously cannot compete with. And so like part of what Elon Musk is doing is like trying to like orchestrate how he can protect Tesla from the Chinese electric vehicle kind of competition. So that's the way I kind of read that.
Of course. Fun question for Dr. Jared's business. Does he do edibles too? Yes, he does. Maybe holidays or weekends.
Could I put my business out there? No, I'm just
not. Okay. I was just like, oh, okay. I don't know.
Like, no, I'm joking. It's not. It's not a secret. Well,
Jared, do you think Trump will work to unify the country after creating a tense political environment?
Fuck no. Like, Trump is about Trump. Like, he doesn't care about, like, he's literally the definition of an opportunist. Like, he's gonna say and do whatever is gonna benefit him. Like, and if that means, honestly, what I think he's probably gonna do more than anything else is like stoke anti-immigration sentiment, because immigration for both parties actually is a wedge issue, in the sense that they like to use immigration to like divide people, when in fact like they both more or less have the same immigration policy, but they can't admit that. So like they have to find ways to like distinguish themselves. As I've kind of talked about before, like in the late 70s, early 80s, like there was this kind of tacit agreement between the Democratic and the Republican Party that they would be what they called each other controlled opposition. So like they would oppose each other, but not really in anything like significant. So like they wouldn't differ on like foreign policy. At the margins, they might disagree on like tactics, but not in the like broader vision of like, what America is doing. And so yeah, I don't see him doing anything to disrupt that. If anything, he's probably just going to exacerbate it. So I don't see why.
It's going to be absolute chaos, in my opinion, but we shall see. I think it's probably going to get worse.
I actually don't think so. I actually don't think much is, as I've said before, I actually don't think much is going to change. Not for their lack of trying, but just because the way that the bureaucracy is set up in the United States, it pretty much. So after Kennedy, I'm not going to say the word because I don't want you to be demonetized, but after that episode, essentially the bureaucracy, especially after LBJ's presidency, became almost entirely self-sufficient, in the sense that, sure, like you might have some things change between administrations, but like by and large, like they there's a certain degree of like agreement among like most high-ranking bureaucrats, irrespective of like which party is in office. And I mean, last I checked, Trump isn't a czar. So like, unless he has some type of magical power that I don't know about, like, I don't see how you can. It's just so like our bureaucracy is designed to be almost insulated from politics. Like that's what kind of the point of it was, which I actually don't think is a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing either, but like that's kind of the structure of it. So I don't think that much will change, honestly.
Hey Jared, I recently listened to some audiobooks by Thomas Sowell. That man doesn't believe in racial inequality at all. No wonder conservatives tout him so much. I personally don't identify with any political parties. Instead, I judge issues on an individual basis.
Yeah, I think the latter part is important, to just be, agnostic and be open to any argument, irrespective of who's making them. Now, Sowell is an interesting figure because he's a Black conservative, and his whole thing is like he believes in a certain. I wouldn't say that he doesn't believe in racial equality, or rather, I don't. His understanding of what like qualifies as equality in is different. And so like what I try to, especially when I teach my Black political thought class, one thing I try to stress upon or to make them realize is that there is like people disagree on like what equality means, and people also disagree on like what inequality means. And so because there is no agreement as to what either of those terms mean, does that mean that everybody has the exact same amount of wealth? Does that mean people have the same equality of opportunity? Does that mean like what does that mean? It's not an easy answer. And so like for Sowell, like his idea is that he thinks that the welfare state and like that kind of like apparatus is actually it treats people as victims, and like when you victimize people, you essentially take away their agency. That's the way. I'm not saying that's true, right or wrong. Like you can decide for yourself whether or not you think that's true. But like he thinks that building the welfare state and making Black people kind of the primary subjects of the welfare state is itself racist, because you essentially associate Black people with poverty in the minds of most people. And when you do that, you create kind of this like reactionary kind of ideas in people's heads about like what Black people are capable of. But more importantly for him, he thinks that you essentially zap Black people of their agency. And again, I don't agree with that per se, but like I think sometimes the way we talk, I always tell my students like, it shouldn't matter who's making the argument. Like if you're just trying to understand and make sense of the argument as an argument in itself, like it doesn't matter if Donald Trump is making it or Barack Obama, whatever. Like an argument is an argument, and like if we're trying to logically understand what they're trying to convey, then we have to be able to do that in a way that allows us to like not get hung up on again who's making the argument. And so I don't agree with Sowell on hardly anything, but like I don't think he's just like some anti-Black demon or anything.
Thank you for breaking that down, because I don't know who that is.
He was really big in the 80s and 90s. There were a lot of Black conservatives who kind of got really prominent in the 80s during the Reagan era, and he was one of them.
Gotcha. So we're going to take a break from the questions, and I wanted to do just a little segment. I talked to you about this like a few episodes ago, but I just want to know, since like I feel like if you were sat in front of these leaders, like I just want to know, like, what would you ask them if you could just ask them any question? So this is kind of just like a what if segment. So first we'll start with Kamala Harris. Like if you got to ask her any question face to face, what would it be?
I would ask her. I remember at one point during the 2020 campaign when she was running for president the first time, she said that she was for Medicare for all who wants it, and I would want to know what the fuck that means, because that never made any sense to me. So like I would want her to, explain to me like I'm 6, like what she meant by that.
Yeah.
It still is like flabbergasting to me because the whole point of Medicare for all is because it's supposed to be transitioning away from like the private provision. So like, what is Medicare for all who wants it? Like, it never made sense to me. So that's what I would ask. And she probably would just give me some like, gibberish, but
Okay. Joe Biden, considering that he has all of his faculties.
It's a huge assumption. What would I ask Joe Biden? Let me bookmark him. I'd have to think about that for a second.
Okay. Well, to your favorite, Barack Obama.
Oh, what would I? Oh, wait. Okay, can I be like really tongue in cheek?
You can. I mean, I think people already know how you feel about Obama.
Okay, so like I'm gonna okay, y'all, like just roll with me here. I'm leaving the realm of like academic thought and I'm putting my tinfoil hat and like my conspiracy theorist perspective on. So honestly, I think that here's my thing about Barack Obama. I think Barack Obama knew so have y'all read his books? Like I've read both of Barack Obama's books, The Dreams from My Father and The Audacity of Hope. I read both of them. I didn't read the one that came out a few years ago because who was about to sit there and read an 800-page book that Obama wrote because it probably was ghostwritten. But anyway, right. So I read these earlier 2 books from like the 2000s or like the early aughts, and I always got the impression that Obama knew he wanted to be the first Black president, but he knew that because he was not 100% Black, and I'm putting air quotes around this because we know that race has no scientific basis, but like because he didn't have 2 Black parents, he knew that was probably going to cost him some problems. And so I felt like he decided at an early point, and there's some evidence in his books that suggests this, which he had to figure out how to perfect his Black performance, because if he didn't, he wasn't going to be viewed as like credible among.
Wait, how to perfect his Black performance?
Like, yeah, how did he have to perform Blackness? So like playing basketball, he knew he had to have a Black wife, so marrying Michelle. But it's not just having a Black wife, but he married a Black woman from the south side of Chicago. Going to Jeremiah Wright, the Black church. I think that Barack Obama, again, I've always thought Barack Obama as being an opportunistic narcissist. And so like, he's also very calculated because he's a really good politician, and all politicians have to be really, really good at acting. They have to be really good performance artists and they have to be really good at calculating. And so I always felt like, his whole like shtick was very much about like, how can I like find that sweet spot to where I can like talk down to Black people, but also like not talk down to them too much to where they like think I'm like belittling them. So it's like a really like sweet spot that he had to like figure out. So I would have asked him at like, what point did you realize you needed to like carry out this plan to be viable? Because I think it was all plot, honestly. And so like, that's what I would ask. I know people are probably like rolling their eyes at me, but like, I feel very strongly about this one. I don't have any evidence to like corroborate this, but like based on my readings of those books and just from like seeing him move and like some of the things I've read about him in terms of like his early so-called community organizing, when really he just worked for a real estate company that like figured out how they could like gentrify Black neighborhoods essentially, but he called that community organizing. And so like he knew from a very early point like what he needed to do to like be viable for both white people and Black people. And so I would want to hear more about that.
Well, okay.
Okay.
All right. We're gonna take a pause right quick. Hello, Andrea. That's my mod. Please make sure y'all like, comment the video. Y'all getting some really good gems here. Yeah. Oh, and thank you, Andrea. I appreciate it.
Y'all don't take me seriously. I'm just spitballing. I have no evidence for any of these things. I said I was wearing my tinfoil hat. So like,
yeah, I mean, that was thought-provoking for me. Like, I just never saw it that way. And I know that was a lot of smoke.
You remember he used to do like you remember what he's saying like Al Green at one of the press conferences? It's just like, I don't know. He just was always so.
I just personally hate when he releases these like his favorite music lists. Like I don't want to.
It's like he's not listening to that. Like it's so obvious. It's just I don't know. Everything about him was just always. I mean, he is charismatic, but I always feel like we should be skeptical of charismatic figures, especially political figures. And so, like, people who like I remember seeing him on the stump during the 2020 election, and he was like delivering a speech in the rain, and like I was like, this man has it. Like he is, I mean, charisma just dripping out of his like just. But he's an opportunistic narcissist, and there's nothing anybody can say to get me to change my mind about that.
I mean, you are like Kendrick and Barack is Drake right now.
Hey, anytime there's an opportunity for me to drag Barack Obama, I'm gonna tap in.
Hey, so we are teetering on 100 people in the chat. I mean, tell a kin, tell a friend, tell that heifer you hate that that we are, we hit 100. Thank you. So
you didn't watch SpongeBob, did you?
What happened?
Watch SpongeBob.
I don't.
Does anybody remember when he used to do the little dance? Like, okay.
I know they're on 25 years, which is crazy to me. I've never been in the SpongeBob like
SpongeBob is I would say the best cartoon released in like the last like 40 years.
4 years or 40?
40.
There's another animated show that I like.
That might be too generous. I might be overstating my case, but it's definitely top 5.
Well, number 1 for me. Anyway, we're gonna move on. And if you're just joining, the topic is like I asked Jared if he had the opportunity to ask any question that he wants to a political figure, what would it be? You're still thinking about Joe Biden, right?
Yeah. I need to come back to him. Honestly, I just don't think about Joe Biden very much because he's just like not interesting to me.
Nancy Pelosi.
Oh, I know what I would ask Joe Biden. Why the fuck does he have to scream during every speech? Like,
you would ask him that?
Yes, like I really want to know, like, who is his communications person and why are they telling him to scream? Like, there's no like crescendo in his speech. It's like a steady 10. It's just like there's no buildup. Like if you listen to Barack Obama, there's like even Kamala, like she has some buildup. Like she kind of starts, with her yelling to get you riled up, and then she kind of like backs off a little bit and kind of like, sets the mood and then gets people kind of like waiting for the hammer to drop. But like from Joe Biden, it's like hardcore from like the outset. And this isn't new. Like if you go watch like his speeches in like the Senate chambers back in like the 80s, he used to do the same thing. And like he was even more aggressively racist then because he would be like, I don't care if, I don't care who you throw in jail. Like I want throw them all in jail, like just screaming into the mic. So I want to know like what's behind that.
Well, thank goodness for growth. That's all I have to say.
But he didn't grow. He still screams.
Fine. I meant like his ideology, maybe.
He got better. He became a better performance artist, slightly.
Nancy Pelosi.
Nancy Pelosi. Oh, actually, I would ask her. Oh no, that's the wrong person. I was gonna say, what was the experience of like, Harvey Milk's death but it wasn't Nancy Pelosi. It was Dianne Feinstein was the one who actually found Harvey Milk slain. So that doesn't count. So what would I ask? I would ask her, why does she think being in Congress for 40 years is good for the American people? Like, honestly, why does she think being in Congress for that long is benefiting anybody besides herself and her family? That's what I would ask. She would come up with some BS answer about like, oh, I have like, now I know how this system works or whatever. And my whole thing would be like, okay, but somebody else could too. It doesn't just have to be you. So like, why do you think you are so uniquely qualified that nobody else out of the 330 whatever million people in the country, well, I guess once you count out the people who are not eligible because of age and other things, but like, what makes you think you're so uniquely qualified? Like I always say, like people who run for office who think that they are just like so special and like nobody can do the job they do. I'm just like, how arrogant could you be? So I would want to know.
Next up, Mitch McConnell.
Mitch
You can ask
McConnell.
him anything.
I would actually. So this is the thing about Mitch McConnell. Like, I feel like people don't give him his credit. Obviously, I don't like Mitch McConnell at all, and I think he's deplorable. But like, people need to like give that man credit for like how vindictive he was. Like, he literally stole a whole Supreme Court seat and was like, "And who gonna check me, boo?" And so I would want to know, like, how did he orchestrate that? Like, how did he, get the ducks in a row? How did he get people to like go along with this unprecedented move to like withhold a Supreme Court seat for like 9 months? Like, no, it was longer than that. It was almost a year. Like literally almost a year. They didn't have a Supreme Court seat was vacant for almost a year because Mitch McConnell almost like single-handedly was like, we're not even putting it up for a vote. Like, fuck a debate. Like, we're not even considering it. So from a political scientist standpoint, I would want to know kind of the back machinations behind that. Like, who did he have to pay off? Like, how did he foster that coalition? Because he couldn't have done it by himself. So he had to have people go along with it. And so I would want to know the kind of the back dealing behind that.
Okay. I have 3 more. AOC.
I would ask AOC if she just wants to be a content creator, if that's really what she's using the House of Representatives for, as like a launch pad. Because I don't get the sense that she really wants power. Like, I feel like she just wants to be liked. And she's also very charismatic. And so like I would want to peek behind the curtain and know like what her actual like aims are. Because I haven't gotten a good read on her. Like, I can't tell if she actually wants to wield power or if she just wants to be like the face of the party. And those are not the same things. Mitch McConnell is not the face of the Republican Party, never has been. But I would argue he's been one of the most powerful Republicans over the last like 30 or 40 years, by way ahead of Trump in terms of like what he was able to do. And like the fact that probably like 15% of Americans at best even know who he is or could even recognize him if he walked right in front of them is crazy. So I want to know like what AOC's aims are.
Basically, like, what's her end game or no?
Yeah, like, what is she after? Does she want power? Does she just want to be a celebrity? Like, what's the deal?
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump.
Assuming that he would answer your question.
Actually, so the thing with Donald Trump is like he actually answers. He's honest a lot of the times, but like at the wrong times. And like there are a lot of like he says the quiet part out loud. Like,
you took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah, he says the quiet part out loud. Like, he can't help himself because he's so like, full of himself. And so like when the spotlight is on him, he's always gonna like say something. What would I say to Trump? Oh, I know what I would ask him. I would ask him, is there a fake Melania? Because I really think there is. I think there's a fake
question. That would be it.
I mean, to me, Trump is not really that interesting he as a like phenomenon is interesting to me as so the Trump phenomenon is interesting to me from like what is it about him that makes people so, not everybody obviously, but like people forget like Trump has been around for a long time and like there is something about him that people have gravitated towards. Like, we might hate him now, but like Trump was on Sex and the City. Trump was on Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Trump was on like all these shows. The Apprentice was one of the highest rated shows on TV for almost a decade. So like he does have some type of something, there's a there that people find interesting about him. Now, once he started saying racist stuff, people just dropped him. But like that didn't go away. And so like that's interesting to me. But Trump as a person, I've never really found him that interesting. Like, he's really tacky. He's really bombastic. I don't really find him that interesting. And like, I don't feel like there's anything I could ask him that would give me any type of like satisfaction in terms of like better understanding something. And so like, yeah, I don't really think there's anything substantive that I would be interested to ask him because he's just not that substantively interesting to me.
Okay. So I was wondering, um, I was gonna. Do you prefer that I like?
Wait, who did I say was a so? Oh, I said I am a socialist.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I am. Okay, I thought they were saying I was saying Trump was a socialist. I was like,
Oh,
oh, okay.
would you prefer like to ask the Supreme Court a question or a particular person? Because I have a particular person I would say you would ask, but
What?
as a whole or separate? Because I was going to ask Ketanji Brown Jackson.
I don't. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know enough about
What
her.
would you ask the Supreme Court as a whole?
What would I ask the Supreme Court as a whole? I would ask the Supreme Court, what do they think is being constituted? That seems like a very simple question, but like, what does the Supreme Court do? They interpret the Constitution. But here's the thing with the Constitution. We talk about the Constitution that it's like as though it's like this document that's just kind of existed forever, when in fact the Constitution is a political document. Like everything in that document is there because of some type of political agreement or disagreement. And so like when I ask people like, oh, this is the Constitution, I'm like, yeah, but what's being constituted? In other words, like, what do they feel like they're trying to protect? And they'll say shit like, oh, American democracy, but like, you can't protect like a idea. Like, I guess you can in theory, but like the idea still has to be rooted in something like material. And so like, what do they feel like they are constituting? And I want to know that. I want to hear a little bit more about each of their, I guess I would want to know from each of them, like kind of what they think, the Constitution is in fact preserving, because it's so taken for granted. And like, you can't even have a critical conversation about the Constitution because we're taught to like revere it from the time we're born. And so like, but it's not, you shouldn't revere a document. Like that's weird. Like to just revere a document and never like question it or like think it's unassailable, like that's a problem. And so I would want to know, like, what do they feel like they're protecting? And again, they probably would give me some platitudes, but like hopefully I could get them to like, say a little bit more.
So this one is just like we're getting to like the news sector.
Okay.
What would you ask Joy Reid?
Oh God, what would I ask Joy Reid? You want me to ask like a serious questions or
Serious
like
question?
Okay. What would I ask Joy Reid? People like that. Again, I'm asking these questions under the assumption that they're going to be forthcoming or honest, which I shouldn't probably assume either of those things. But like assuming that that's the case, I would want to know, like, does she actually believe the things she's saying? Because like a lot of the time she says stuff, I'm just like, you can't believe what you're saying. Like, I think she knows like she has an audience and she has to like feed them a certain line or a certain perspective because she knows that that's what they're seeking. Like with cable news, it's like, it's a business. So like they have market researchers. So like they know what people are clicking on. They know what people are watching. They know when people aren't watching. They know what types of segments people are responding to, what type of narratives people are like rejecting and all those things. And so like, it's hard to know like whether or not like people actually believe the things they're saying, which I think it might to us seem like, oh, what's the big deal? Like it's just a show. But I'm like, well, when we talk about people not trusting the news media or people like not trusting these institutions, I think part of it is because they don't actually believe that the people who are communicating these things are actually believing the things they're saying. Whereas back in like, when we had Walter Cronkite, why was he the most trusted man in America? Because people actually thought he had integrity and the things that he reported on, he believed that they were the truth and factual and like honest. And so I don't think people think that way about the media now. And so I would want to talk to Joy and ask her, as a journalist that she purports to be, do you actually think the things you're saying are in fact true? Because a lot of the things you say are fucking ridiculous. So yeah, that's probably what I'd ask her.
Can you give the audience just an example of one of the things she said that was ridiculous? I'm just curious.
Yeah, she said like, the Infrastructure Reform Act or bill, whatever, that Joe Biden passed early on in his presidency was going to primarily, was passed because it would mainly benefit like white working class men, which I'm like, but actually would probably disproportionately benefit Black and Latino men because they are disproportionately among the like really like Latin men who are disproportionately among the working class. And so she just like kind of flippantly rejected the whole bill because she was like, oh, this is a bill for like white men. I'm just like, but these are actually like bills that can improve the lives of all sorts of people, not just like white men. And it's not even primarily white men, but you're just saying that because you know that's probably what your middle class liberal audience wants to hear and like gets them riled up. And I'm just like, but that's disingenuous. And so like I would want to know like whether or not like she actually believes stuff like that. Like she's interpreted a lot of like politics that way in this like zero sum game. And I'm just like, no, that's disingenuous. It's just like, and so I would want to know like whether or not she's doing that just to get people riled up or if she like genuinely believes these things.
What journalists you think like? Do you trust any journalists right now, like in present day?
Not like mainstream journalists. If you work for a corporation, no. But there's a lot of really good independent media that I follow. Like, so there's one journalist called Ben Norton. I would highly recommend it. He has a channel called the Geopolitical Economy Report, and he reports on not only news in the U.S. but also like across the globe about different economic policies that are being passed in kind of different developments around the world. But like he does it from the standpoint of like actually like critiquing power and critiquing you know, these politicians and these corporations, which you very seldom or will never hear on like MSNBC, or if you do, it'll be like in some, you know, vague way. And so like there's a lot of really good independent media that I follow. And I trust them because like number one, they don't depend on corporations to like, you know, butter their bread. And two, like I just, you know, they actually provide like receipts. And so like things that they talk about, like they often link to specific things that were said, specific documents that are publicly available. So like if you question the things they say, like you can easily like go and like check them out yourself. And so there's a lot of really good independent media I trust.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to let one person in the audience ask the same question I'm asking. Someone asked Candace Owens, but I don't take her seriously. She is a clown and a non-motherfucking factor.
Wait, let's take her seriously though. Like let's assume that Candace Owens actually is genuine in the sense that she's doing what she actually believes. Now that to me is more interesting than rejecting her, because then I want to know like why does she actually believe the things that she believes. To me, Candace Owens is just a millennial. Is she a millennial or Gen X? How old is she? I don't know.
Well, her dry skin says 48, but she's probably 40 or 41. I don't know. Someone in the chat, how old is she? But I think she's a millennial.
Yeah, so like she's just a millennial version of like there's always been a very steady conservative stream of conservative thought. Like she's not new. Now I think the difference with Candace Owens is she's not an intellectual in the sense that she's not making academic arguments. She's an entertainer, and like she platforms on networks and on stations that are designed and meant to entertain. And so like she's gonna purposely say things to get people riled up. A, because it gets her invited back, and B, because like again, that's what butters her bread. And so yeah, I want to again, she's kind of like Joy. I would want to actually like talk to her and peek behind the curtain and get a sense of like whether or not she actually, you know, truly believes the things she does. Not because she shouldn't. I believe anybody should be. If you want to be conservative, you want to be whatever, like that's on you. Like, but I want to understand like the sources of that.
Okay.
Investigative journalist. She's not 35.
She's not 35.
Clue fan 852 is totally trolling. There's no way. When he said I need to see the receipts.
35? Whoa. Okay, so first person in the chat, name a political figure that, you know, same question I'm asking Jared.
Damn, she really is 35. Like, wow. I'm like mind blown. But here's the thing, like she kind of has to look dusty like that because like otherwise she wouldn't have the audience she has.
That's a mess. 35. 35. Woof. Yeah, I'm just waiting for somebody. If y'all have a person in mind, if you want Jared to ask a question to them, who would it be?
Yeah.
Not crispity crunchy.
Yeah, my mind is actually
Okay.
yeah,
What
so,
would he,
Jimmy Carter.
yeah, if he was still with us.
So Jimmy Carter is an interesting figure because he became president at a time where America was really there were a lot of things happening globally that really were outside his control. I mean, so let's get the other things on the table. Like, yes, he was the president. Yes, he oversaw the imperialist core. Yes, he was, yes. All US presidents are going to do that because, like, it's an institutional thing. It's not a person thing. So, like, all those things, like, if you assume the office of the presidency, you're going to be an imperialist president. Like, it's just what it is. So, like, okay, we talked about that. Now, Jimmy Carter as a figure is interesting because he became president at a time when there was a lot of like global upheaval and things that he really couldn't control. Like there was, and like partially what Jimmy Carter was trying to do was like, how was America going to adjust to kind of this new era that seemed like it was kind of all over the place. And one of the things that he was faced is consumption. And so, like, when Jimmy Carter was president, there was what they called an oil epidemic or oil crisis, where the cost of gas in the United States just like skyrocketed for, again, reasons that were largely out of his control, but like he had to deal with the consequences of it. So, like, if you're ever interested, there's a really, there's a speech that Jimmy Carter gave. Some people call it the malaise speech, but there's a speech he gave where he essentially told Americans, you know, look, the last like 4 decades, we've built this like consumer society where, you know, all we do is just like consume. Like now we really have to take a step back and say, you know, do we really need all of these things? Do we really need to like, you know, drive all these places? Do we really need this? Or can we kind of like, you know, cut back a little bit? In fact, he volunteered to, well, not volunteered, but he ordered like solar panels to be put on top of the White House to kind of practice what he preached, so to speak. But yeah, so people read that speech in some ways as like him essentially saying that Americans had to lower their standard of living, which if you actually listen to what he's saying is not the case. It was a little disingenuous. But like what ends up happening is that, you know, Ronald Reagan essentially ran a campaign essentially saying that asking Americans to like lower their living standards was like anti-American. And so like he painted Jimmy Carter as being like anti-American because he essentially was admitting that America couldn't do whatever it wanted to do. And which flew in the face of American exceptionalism, which American exceptionalism is an ideology that has been around since, you know, the founding of the country, in the sense that the United States is unlike every other, you know, settlement, every other civilization that's ever existed. Of course, like it's very arrogant, but like it's a thing. And so like Jimmy Carter, I think in a lot of ways wasn't favorable in a lot of circles because he in a lot of ways was starting to call into question American exceptionalism and the limits of American power. And people weren't ready to hear that yet. And so I think he's an interesting figure. I think that he also very academic at a time where our country was becoming increasing less and less intellectual. And so like, you know, people didn't want to hear complex things. Like they wanted easy solutions and easy answers, which Reagan gave them. And so I thought it's not an accident that Reagan followed Carter, because Reagan was literally everything Carter wasn't, in the sense that Carter was an intellectual. Reagan was a performer. He was literally an actor. Carter, you know, was a realist in the sense that, you know, America can't do whatever it wants. Reagan sold people a story. It made them feel good. And so like, he's an interesting figure. I have a lot of issues with some of his economic policies because, you know, part of what he supported economically or allowed to happen economically really had a really negative impact, especially on Black people. So like, why did we have people forget that part of the reason we had the crack epidemic in the 80s is because Jimmy Carter appointed the chair of the Federal Reserve, Paul Volcker, who rose interest rates to like 20%. And it incited recessions all over the country. And so like, especially in cities. And so like Black people, because cities were disproportionately Black, like they disproportionately suffered because, you know, it really created New York almost had a depression in the 80s. And so that really, and, you know, Carter was instrumental in that. And so like, he had some, you know, some negative things that he should be criticized about too, although you won't see that in the media because we just revere every president who dies.
And what would be your question? I know you asked it in
the what would I ask him? I would ask him, you know, what did he think about the presidency? Did it like, because some people will say that after he left the presidency, he almost had like a sense of guilt about being president because, you know, he saw like, you know, firsthand, like what it meant to be in the seat of the imperial core. And so some people argue that the reason he really got into like Habitat for Humanity and like all these other like, you know, humanitarian efforts is because he had some sense of like regret and guilt about, you know, being president of the empire. And so like, I would want to know, like, what did that experience do to him in terms of, you know, did he feel as though he could have done anything differently? I have to think that he would, you know, have regretted some of his economic policies, especially towards the end. But also, like, the thing with any policy is there's going to be like intended consequences and a lot of unintended consequences. You get blamed for both, but like, no one person can affect everything and control a lot of the things that happen are beyond any one person's or any multiple people's control. And so like, yeah, I would just want to know like what the experience of being president actually did to him, to his psyche. Yeah.
Such good ones. If you can shorten it a bit, just because we have a few more minutes left. James Baldwin.
I don't know if I have a question for him immediately. I'd have to think about it.
Bernie Sanders.
I would ask Bernie Sanders if he genuinely believes that billionaires are the problem, because in a lot of ways, I think that Bernie Sanders has done us a disservice in the sense that his whole thing is like, the issue is like monopolies and billionaires. Like we need to break up the monopolies and get rid of the billionaires. And I'm like, no, the problem is capitalism. And as long as we have capitalism, we're going to have billionaires and monopolies. And so like, that's not the problem. But I think what he does is he focuses so much on like individuals and corporations. And I think it leads a lot of people to think that, oh, if we just got rid of corporations, we just got rid of billionaires, all will be solved. I'm like, no, like, the problem is capitalism. And it's not just about those two things. It's about the way that we organize our society, the way that we relate to each other, the way that we are compelled to burn ourselves out. Like that's the problem. It's not about people. It's not about corporations. It's about capitalism. And so I want to know, like, does he understand that?
Actually, I actually wanted to have her on my list. What would you ask Michelle Obama?
I mean, yeah. So Michelle Obama is interesting because in a lot of ways, I think I'm sorry, anybody who marries Barack Obama is also gonna be opportunistic too, but like, not in a malicious way. I think Michelle knew that Obama was, you know, destined to, if not be president, to have a very lucrative kind of career. And Michelle Obama is herself like credentialed, you know, went to all the Ivy Leagues and all that stuff too. So like, she didn't really need him per se, but you know, we know from most, you know, research in class that part of what class is about is like reproducing your own like social position in the society. So like, why do wealthy people typically marry wealthy people? Because when your powers combine, like you could like, especially with like inheritance, like you can do some big things and control a lot of institutions and like be super powerful. Honestly, I think maybe really, okay, let me put the tinfoil hat back on. maybe really what they wanted was to be like movie producers, because I feel like they both are really leaning into this like movie production thing. And so like maybe they're like, let's just use the presidency to like lock in what is really our secret adventure, which is to be just like the Black Harvey Weinsteins, but without all the mess. Maybe that's what they were after.
Interesting.
Yeah, this doesn't make any fucking sense. I'm just spitballing.
Okay. I mean, and what would your question be for her?
Why she wanted to, what she saw in Barack Obama.
Okay. Well,
she gives real answers and not, oh, I knew that he was special and like really, no, like be real with us.
Right. Well, that was a fun.
We also had to teach him how to be Black. Let's not forget about that. Part of Barack marrying Michelle was there was an understanding that she was going to teach him how to be Black so he could have his Black bona fides. Because of the two, like, who is the one that really, people really held it down? Like, it was always Michelle. And so, like, she gave him street cred, essentially.
But not street cred. Oh, my goodness.
I mean, a Black man from born in Canada or in Hawaii, and yeah, like, come on, like, let's be real.
Hey. Well, that was a fun segment. I enjoyed that. We're gonna wind down. Natasha wants to know what's a good book on Reaganomics, because I know you read a lot.
A good book on Reaganomics. I would say there's a really good book called Disciplining the Poor. It's really good because what it does is it talks about how a lot of those kind of economic policies of the 80s and even into the 90s, people forget that welfare reform was passed under Clinton. So Clinton's economic policies were in a lot of respects just an extension of Reaganomics, but just like on steroids. And so, there's another really good book called The Rise and Fall of the Neoliberal Order. That's another really good book too on Reaganomics, like the ideas behind them, like how they were passed, like why did the public support a lot of the policies? And people forget, like, Reagan did this with a Democratic Congress. Like, people blame him, but like he had a Democratic Congress and a Democratic Senate who went along with these policies. So Reaganomics wasn't just Reagan. So we shouldn't forget that.
Well, so we're going to wrap it up, y'all. We're on the hour mark. Thank you so much, Jared, for, dropping gems, as always.
It was a pleasure. I had a blast. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Join us on a Friday evening.
Right. A steady 100 people in the room. I mean, we made it. Like, I feel like this is like Housewives numbers on my channel. So I'm glad that y'all are so interested. And I'm glad we gave like an interesting conversation that wasn't depressing. It wasn't too depressing today.
No, I don't think so. See what happens when we don't like make every episode about the election.
Exactly. I mean, to be fair, I mean, it was kind of important.
Yeah. I'm not regretting it, but like I think people got a little, disillusioned. Right. So
yeah, we had a nice little break from politics. I definitely needed it.
Yeah.
But yeah, let them know where they can follow you. I mean, I'm sure it's up there, but you could just say it again.
Yeah, so JC Tiger Fan, it's right beneath my lovely face. Also, again, if you have not signed up for my Substack, I'm going live on Monday. It's the big launch. So I think Chris said he'll put the link on the channel. So so sign up. It's going to be a good time. I think I have a lot of really cool things in store, and I'm super excited to share with the world. And hopefully, it's something different. Like I've thought a lot about this, so I'm not just shooting from the hip.
Cool. And make sure y'all look out for his book when it drops.
Oh God, it won't be this year. Like I hope in a perfect world it'll be next year. Hopefully we can get it.
You sound like Cardi B with her album, with her next.
Well,
album.
The thing is, like, I actually have like a manuscript, but a lot of it is out of my hands in terms of like the production process is really long, the review process, the editing, and the printing, all that stuff. So like, hopefully next year I'm doing everything. I'm busting my ass to get it done by next year so I can move on my life. So.
Well, okay, y'all. So with that, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see y'all for the next episode.